Lamb's gentle adventure lamb was a quiet boy who lived in a small, foggy village nestled between vast hills and sleepy forests. Every morning, he would wake up to the sound of birds chirping gently outside his window and the scent of mist-covered grass drifting in through the wooden cracks of the house. Nothing ever changed here. People spoke softly, and the clouds always hung low, as if the sky itself was resting. Lamb loved walking along the riverbank, where the water flowed lazily, brushing against moss-covered stones. He would often sit there for hours, doing nothing, just listening to the wind and the soft gurgle of the stream. One morning, while following a winding trail lined with fallen leaves, Lamb stumbled upon a small, round stone that shimmered faintly in the soft light. It wasn't glowing brightly or pulsing with magic. It simply shimmered, like it had been waiting there, quietly, for someone who would notice. He picked it up. It felt warm in his hand. That night, for the first time in years, Lamb dreamed. He dreamed of a forest that breathed, trees that whispered secrets, and stars that blinked down like sleepy eyes. In the dream, the stone gently hummed in his pocket. When he woke up, the humming was gone, but the warmth remained. The next few days passed slowly, just like before. But something had shifted. The birds seemed to sing softer songs. The wind, when it moved through the trees, seemed to carry forgotten lullabies. Even the river flowed with more purpose, though still in its quiet, lazy way. Lamb began to walk further from the village. The stone, though silent, gave him comfort, like a quiet friend who never needed to speak. One afternoon, as a light drizzle fell, Lamb found himself in a part of the forest he didn't recognize. The trees were taller here, and the ground was covered in soft moss. A deer looked at him from behind a tree, its eyes calm and curious. It didn't run. It simply turned and walked slowly. Lamb followed. The deer led him to a clearing where an old tree stood, its trunk so wide that a house could have been built inside it. At its roots was a small pool of still water. The deer looked at Lamb one last time, then disappeared into the woods. Lamb sat by the pool. The stone began to glow softly again. And there, in the hush of the quiet forest, Lamb closed his eyes, not out of fear or worry, but because his body and the world around him asked for stillness. He didn't know why he had come here, or what the stone truly was, or if he was meant to do anything important at all. But in that moment, it didn't matter, because Lamb was where he needed to be, and the world, gentle, slow, and old, was humming a lullaby just for him. Lamb had finished packing and left his village. The narrow trail leading up to Thatch Bang Mountain was quiet, save for the sound of his footsteps and the wind whispering through old branches. He knew this journey would not be like the ones before. As he entered the forest at the foot of the mountain, things began to feel strange. The ancient trees seemed to sense his presence. He could hear them breathing, murmuring like guardians of old. Farther down the path, he came upon a crystal-clear stream. He paused to drink, then continued. Suddenly, he felt watched. Turning around, he saw a strange creature. It had the body of a deer and the head of a bird, with eyes like gemstones. It stared at him, then gently stepped forward, as if inviting him to follow. Lamb, without hesitation, obeyed. The creature led him down narrow trails to a place where jagged mountain rocks rose like blades, and an ancient stone gate stood silently. The gate was covered in intricate carvings, weathered by time. The creature looked at him one last time, then passed through the gate. Lamb followed. As he stepped inside, the world around him shifted. He had entered another realm. It was a surreal garden with glowing trees and fruits like stars. In the center lay a still pool reflecting the starry sky. Peace filled him. He approached the pool. As he looked into the water, an image formed, an old man with white hair and deep, knowing eyes. "Welcome, Lamb," the man said. "I am the guardian. How do you know me?" Lamb asked. "You seek answers. The stone you carry is a key, not just to power, but to understanding and connection." "What must I do?" Lamb asked. The guardian pointed to the water. "Ask a question. The pool will show the way." Lamb looked into the pool. "How can I help nature?" he asked. The water rippled, showing him a vision, a forest where animals and people lived in harmony. He saw himself planting trees, healing wounded animals, and sharing knowledge. The message was clear. True help comes not from control, but from care and connection. The guardian nodded. "You have found the answer. Now go. Your journey continues." Further into the mountains, Lamb walked toward the peaks. A strange, dark cloud hovered near one summit. He climbed carefully until he stood before it. A man in black emerged from the fog, tall, red-eyed, powerful. "You defeated the beast in the woods?" he asked. "Yes," Lamb replied. "Then face your true test. But first, what have you learned?" Lamb paused, then spoke clearly. "True strength comes not from the stone alone, but from the bond one share with nature and the life around me." The man nodded slowly. The darkness faded. "You are ready." Soon after, Lamb followed a glowing trail through the forest to an ancient temple. Inside, a crystal glowed atop a pedestal. When he touched it, light filled the room and transported him to a vast dreamlike field beneath a violet sky. There, a woman of shimmering light greeted him. "You have entered the realm of the ancients," she said, "the source of all natural energy. You have been chosen to guard it." "Me? Why?" Lamb asked. "Because your heart listens. You see the beauty in the world and choose to protect it." She took his hand. Power surged through him. He could hear the trees, the birds, the rivers, everything alive. "You must return," she said. "But know this, you are never alone." The vision faded. Lamb stood once again in the quiet temple. He walked out with purpose, no longer a wanderer, but a guardian, his heart steady, his path just beginning. The journey beyond the temple. As Lamb stepped out of the ancient temple, the air felt different, lighter, as if the world had exhaled with him. The forest no longer seemed mysterious or distant. Every leaf, stone, and whisper of wind felt familiar, like an old friend welcoming him home. He walked slowly, tracing the path back through the forest. Birds flew silently overhead, and small animals peeked out from behind the underbrush, sensing something had changed in him. The glowing trail that had once guided him was now gone, but he no longer needed it. He trusted his steps. After a day's walk, Lamb reached a high ridge overlooking a vast valley. Below, rivers coiled like silver threads, and meadows shimmered in the evening light. But in the distance, he saw something unsettling. A patch of the valley where the trees were blackened, the grass brown, and the sky stained with a dull haze. The land was sick. Lamb remembered the vision in the crystal, the harmony, the healing, the balance he had seen. He now knew his purpose: to help bring life back to this broken part of the world. He descended into the valley with quiet determination. As he approached the dying forest, the once soft whispers of nature were replaced with silence. No birds, no rustling leaves, just stillness. He knelt beside a wilted flower and placed the crystal from the temple on the ground. Closing his eyes, he focused, not on power, but on connection, on remembering how the deer had trusted him, how the trees had once spoken, how the guardian's voice had calmed his fears. A warmth spread from his chest into the earth. At first, nothing happened. Then gently the soil darkened, not with rot, but with richness. A faint green sprout emerged from the cracked dirt. Then another. The wind stirred, carrying a single bird song on its back. Lamb opened his eyes and smiled. Weeks passed. Lamb stayed in the valley, living simply. He slept under trees, drank from clear streams, and tended to the land with patience. He never forced growth, he listened. When the trees needed rest, he let them sleep. When the rivers overflowed, he guided them calmly. Slowly, the forest began to breathe again. One day, as he was repairing an old irrigation channel, a group of villagers arrived. They were from a neighboring town and had heard of a quiet boy who was healing the land. At first, they watched from afar. Then one of them, a young girl with curious eyes, asked if she could help. Lamb nodded. She planted a sapling. More people came, quietly, respectfully. They didn't ask for anything. They simply helped. And the valley responded. Flowers bloomed. Birds returned. The haze lifted. One evening, the girl asked Lamb, "Are you a sorcerer?" Lamb shook his head gently. "No, just someone who listens." Years later, the valley became a place of rest and reflection. Travelers, poets, farmers, and tired souls would come and sit among the trees that once stood black and brittle. They didn't ask questions. They simply breathed. Lamb built a small home from fallen branches and stone, not hidden, but not obvious. He didn't lead the valley. He just lived in it, quietly. Sometimes at night, when the moon hung low, he would walk to the edge of the forest and feel the hum of the world beneath his feet. The crystal, now pale and dim, rested on a small altar beside his bed. It no longer needed to shine. One night, he dreamt again, not of visions or symbols, but of a deer with gemstone eyes, standing in the clearing where it had once led him. It looked at him, bowed its head slightly, and disappeared into golden mist. Lamb woke up smiling. And so, the boy who had once wandered through a sleepy village, unsure of his path, became a part of the land itself, rooted not in power, but in patience, not in glory, but in grace. The forest knew his name, and when he was gone, it whispered his story to the wind. A new visitor to the valley had changed little, though time had passed like a quiet stream flowing beneath the earth. Lamb was long gone. No one remembered the day he left, or if he ever did. Some believed he had become a tree, tall and still. Others said he had walked into the mist and disappeared. But the forest remembered him. The birds still sang softer near the old altar. And when the wind moved through the trees, it carried a name like a whisper, Lamb. One morning, under a sky pale with dawn, a young boy named An arrived at the edge of the valley, and was quiet too, not by nature, but because the world outside had grown too loud. He came from a city of stone and sound, where everything moved too fast and nothing ever paused. One day, after reading a dusty book in his grandfather's attic, a book that spoke of a boy who healed forests, and decided to find this forgotten place. He didn't tell anyone. He simply left. Now, as he stood on the hill looking down at the sleeping valley, he felt a strange warmth in his chest. The trees below swayed gently, as if they already knew he was coming, and walked for hours. Birds circled overhead. A fox watched him from the bushes. Eventually, he found an old path of moss-covered stones. It led to a small house made of branches and river rock. The roof had partly collapsed, but everything else remained. Inside, he found a small altar, and on it, a pale crystal. He reached out. The moment his fingers brushed the stone, he felt, not power, but stillness. A stillness so deep it made his heart beat slow and his mind quiet. It was as if the stone remembered what it once was, and it was sharing that memory with him. A low wind stirred. Leaves rustled. Somewhere in the trees, a deer lifted its head and stayed. Seasons turned slowly and tended to the little house. He repaired the roof, swept the floors, and gathered fruit and herbs from the forest. At first, he thought he was just visiting, but time began to melt. Weeks folded into months, and then forgot about the city entirely. He began to notice things. The way the moss grew only on the north side of the stones. The way the wind changed when rain was coming. The way animals paused near certain trees, as if they were sacred. He listened, and the forest spoke, not in words, but in rhythm. He placed the crystal in the window, where it caught the morning light. Over time, it began to glow again, very faintly, like a memory returning. One night, as An was sitting outside watching fireflies dance between trees, he heard a soft voice. Not from behind him, not from around him, but from within. "You found your way," and looked up. The stars blinked gently above. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The forest knew. Full circle years passed, and the valley bloomed. Not just with flowers and trees, but with visitors. Not crowds, never crowds, but wanderers. those who had grown tired of noise and wanted to remember silence. They arrived with heavy hearts and left with lighter steps. They never asked him how old he was or where he came from. He smiled rarely, but when he did, it felt like spring. People began to call the place the Listening Valley. Some said it healed you. Others said it helped you forget. But those who stayed long enough knew the truth. It didn't do anything to you. It simply let you be. And at the heart of the valley, in a small home of branches and stone, lived a boy who listened, and a crystal that still shimmered softly in the morning sun. The whispering tree one afternoon in late spring, as light poured lazily through the green canopy above, and was walking along the edge of the old river when he heard something unusual. A whisper. Not the wind, not the birds. It was words. Faint, old, carried on the breeze like a forgotten lullaby. He turned toward the sound and followed it through tall ferns and across a shallow stream. The forest thickened, but the whisper grew clearer, not louder. It felt like memory speaking. Finally, he reached a tree unlike any other. It was vast, with bark the color of ash and silver. Its roots curled above the ground like the fingers of a sleeping giant. A single vine wound around its trunk, blooming with small, glowing blossoms. It was humming, not with sound, but with presence, and sat at its base. He placed his hand against the bark, and the tree responded, the dream of the forest that night, and dreamed. But it was not his dream. He saw Lamb, much younger than any tale had described him, standing before the same tree, his eyes wide, a deer beside him. Lamb placed the pale crystal at the tree's root. The ground pulsed with soft light. And then the vision changed. He saw storms, fire, shadows creeping through forests, cutting down trees, scattering animals. Then silence. And then this tree, standing alone in the ashes, whispering to the wind, and awoke with a start. The air was still. The valley was quiet. But something inside him stirred. The warning the next day, and climbed to the highest ridge and saw, far beyond the valley, a faint smoke rising into the sky. Not from a campfire, but something heavier. Industrial. Angry. The world beyond was creeping closer. Later that evening, he sat beside the crystal in the small house. It glowed steadily now, stronger than ever before. He remembered Lamb's lesson, not to resist with force, but to respond with care. But this time, the care would have to reach beyond the valley. He would have to leave. The journey begins again and packed simply. Herbs, seeds, a carved wooden flute, and the crystal. He left a note at the altar, not in ink, but in etched stone. The valley listens. And now I must speak. He walked out of the forest, the trees bending slightly as he passed, as if wishing him luck. The road was long. The world beyond was noisy again. Cars, smoke, flashing lights. People hurried. No one looked at the sky, but walked calmly through it all. In crowded villages, he taught children how to plant seeds. In cities, he played soft music that made strangers stop and breathe. At each place, he buried a pinch of valley soil. And in time, tiny listening places began to bloom. Not loud, not fast, but steady. Legacy years later, children would speak of a man who carried silence in his pocket and could make flowers grow from dust. Some said he came from a hidden forest. Others said he was the forest. But in the listening valley, the tree still hummed. The crystal still glowed. And every now and then, a gentle wind would blow through the leaves, carrying a whisper, Lamb, and all those who listen. Chapter. The city of murmurs and arrived at a place unlike any he had ever known. The city was vast, its buildings stacked like stones toward the sky, its streets humming with machines, voices, and urgency. The air was thick with motion. Lights blinked all day, all night. But no one looked at the stars. People rushed everywhere, eyes down, ears closed. The only sounds were instructions, arguments, and advertisements. Even laughter seemed mechanical, recorded and replayed. This was the city of murmurs, though no one called it that aloud. But and could hear it. the low, constant hum beneath the surface. Not machines, not people, but pain, a quiet ache hiding in every hurried footstep. He knew what he had to do. The seed in the courtyard and found a forgotten corner of the city, an abandoned courtyard hemmed in by cracked walls and broken fences. Trash filled the corners. The ground was dry and hard. Perfect. He knelt in the dirt. Gently, he dug a small hole. From the pouch around his neck, he took a single black seed, smooth and round, a gift from the whispering tree. He placed it in the ground, covered it, then sat and waited. Hours passed. People walked by, barely noticing him. A few muttered about strange boys with no phone. But one child, no more than 6, stopped. "What are you doing?" "Listening," and said. "To what?" "The ground." The boy knelt beside him. The garden of slow things, words spread slowly. A man was growing a tree in a place where nothing grew. At first, no one believed it, but some came to look. And when they saw the boy and the child sitting silently beside a patch of earth, they paused. And something happened. Not to the tree, it still hadn't sprouted, but to the city. For one moment, someone stopped moving. Then another. A street vendor sat beside them and offered fruit, saying nothing. An old woman brought a cracked watering can. A teenager dropped her backpack and just breathed. They didn't know why, but they felt it. A week later, a single green stem pushed through the earth. The man who couldn't hear, but not everyone welcomed this quiet. A man in a silver suit, tall, clean, and proud, stood at the edge of the courtyard one morning. He was a city official, though his name was never said. His face was smooth, his eyes sharp. He watched the crowd in silence, then spoke with a voice that cut through the air. "This is not a park. This is city property. You are trespassing. The boy must leave." People looked around, unsure. No one moved. The man stepped closer to an, "You're disrupting traffic. Productivity is down in this block. You are not helping," and looked up slowly. "I'm not here to help," he said. "I'm here to listen." The man scowled. "Listen to what?" "To the things you stopped hearing a long time ago." The man paused. He opened his mouth, then closed it, and walked away. But he did not forget. Roots in the stone the tree grew. It did not grow fast or tall or flashy, but it was strong. Its roots cracked the concrete, softening the edges of the city's hardness. Flowers bloomed in shoe prints. Laughter returned, but gently. Even the machines seemed to hum in tune with the wind. The man in the silver suit returned one day, not to stop it, but to sit. He stayed silent, and when he left, a tiny seed clung to his shoe. And so the listening valley spread, not with fanfare, not with force, but through those who paused, those who breathed, and those who remembered what it meant to feel the world and let it speak, and kept walking. Because every city has a courtyard, every soul has a seed, and every forest begins with someone who listens. Chapter: The girl and the stone. Her name was Mira. She was 8 years old the day she found the seed. It had rolled out from her father's old coat, a gray, dusty thing he never wore anymore. She had been playing beside the window when the wind knocked it down from its hook. As she picked it up, a small, round seed dropped from its pocket. Smooth, warm, alive. She didn't know where it came from, but when she held it, she felt stillness spread through her fingers. That night, she dreamed of a tree with silver bark and leaves that shimmered like moonlight. A man stood beneath it, his eyes gentle, holding a flute. He said nothing, but the wind behind him whispered, "Plant it where no one is watching. Then wait." The forgotten corner. Mira lived in a busy place. Cars, neon signs, loud voices. Everything was always moving. Her parents were kind but tired. The city was too fast for listening. So one morning she snuck away. She carried the seed in a matchbox lined with cotton. She walked through alleyways, across quiet rooftops, past old train tracks, until she found a place no one had touched in years. A narrow strip of soil behind an abandoned bookstore. There were cigarette butts, cracks, shadows, but also silence. She knelt, dug a small hole with her hands, placed the seed, covered it, and whispered, "I'm here." Then she waited. The sound of waiting for days, Mira returned. Sometimes she brought water. Other times, she just sat and hummed to herself. She didn't tell anyone what she was doing. This place was hers and the seeds. On the 7th day, she brought her sketchbook and drew the dream tree. As she looked up from her paper, she saw it, just a sprout, barely a whisper of green, poking through the soil. She didn't shout. She didn't run. She smiled quietly. And the wind picked up, brushing her cheek like a hand. The listening child Mira began to change. She stopped rushing. She asked questions no one had time to answer. She'd stare at trees, listen to puddles, and hum to birds on telephone wires. People called her odd, but they also noticed something. When Mira was around, their shoulders relaxed. Their voices softened. Even her teacher, who never smiled, began to hum while grading papers. The bookstore owner returned one day to find flowers blooming behind his building. He never asked who planted them, but every morning after, he left a cup of tea on the windowsill for whoever might need it. The echo of one autumn morning, a traveler passed through the city. He was older now, still quiet, still carrying a flute and a crystal that had dimmed into almost nothing, except when near seeds like Myra's, and stood behind the bookstore for a long time. He didn't knock, didn't speak, just placed a small, folded note between the bricks where the wind could find it. Mira discovered it the next morning. In simple writing it said, "You listened. Now they will too. The tree remembers. Keep going." She kept it in her pocket forever. Legacy of the quiet, one's more children found seeds. Not many, but enough. They didn't form a movement. They didn't go viral. They simply planted, waited, and listened. And in time, the world shifted, not in a crash, but like a tree growing toward the sun. Quiet, certain, unstoppable. Chapter. The snow listener years had passed since Mira planted her first seed. The city had changed, though subtly. Small gardens in forgotten corners, benches where noise used to be, and people beginning to speak more softly, more slowly. Mira had grown too. Her hands were stronger now, her eyes more observant, her silences deeper. But something inside her began to stir again, a quiet question. It came to her in dreams. What waits beyond the trees, you know? So she packed lightly, a coat, her sketchbook, and a pouch of seeds she'd gathered over the years. She left a note behind on her childhood windowsill. Listening doesn't end here. Then, she followed the wind north. Across the white silence, she crossed hills where frost kissed the tips of trees, and villages where people spoke in short bursts of warmth before retreating to their fires. In these quiet places, Mira saw signs, hidden and small. A boy in a fur coat humming to a frozen river. A grandmother who always left one bowl of soup on her windowsill at dusk. A willow tree growing through the roof of an old chapel. It was as though others had come before her. And then, after a week of walking through snow that fell like sleep, Mira arrived at a strange, silent field. The bell beneath the ice, there was nothing in the field but ice. Flat, endless, white. But Mira could feel something beneath it. A sound, low and steady, like a heartbeat wrapped in snow. She knelt, placed her palm to the ground, and closed her eyes. She didn't hear it. She felt it. A memory, far older than her, pulsing underfoot. She stayed. Days passed. She slept in the hollow of a fallen pine. She melted snow for water, ate dried fruit. She waited. And then, one morning, when dawn was barely blue, she awoke to a soft hum vibrating through the frost. The ice had cracked, and in the center of the field, a single, dark shape emerged, a bell. The guardian's bell. It was made of stone and lichen, half-buried, ancient. No writing, no rope. But as Mira stepped closer, the air grew still, and every bird seemed to pause mid-flight. She reached out. The moment her fingers brushed the surface, the bell sang. Not aloud, but inside her. a sound of trees and firelight, of old footsteps and forgotten names. And then one voice, very faint. The last guardian slept here. Wake what must be woken. The sound faded. The wind resumed. Mira sat beside the bell for a long time. And then she did what she always did first. She listened. The frozen seed before she left the ice field. Mira planted a seed near the bell. Not deep, just enough to keep it safe beneath the frost. She whispered to it, "Grow only when the world is ready." And as she turned to go, a flicker of green shimmered beneath the surface. Just for a moment, but it was enough. Where to next? Mira's journey was not over. Ahead were mountains, and beyond them, deserts, rivers, oceans, lost songs, listening posts hidden beneath cities, wind towers that whispered names, quiet children waiting to remember what the world had forgotten, and always in the distance that gentle, steady hum. A legacy passed from Lamb to An, from An to Mira, and now, who knows, maybe to you. Chapter: The desert that listened back after weeks of travel through windswept passes and starlit valleys. Mira arrived at the edge of the Great Silica Desert. It stretched before her like an ocean of copper and bone. Dunes rose and fell like frozen waves. There were no trees here, no birds, only the breath of the wind dragging soft patterns in the sand. Mira stepped forward. With each step, the hum of the listening bell faded behind her. And yet, the silence of the desert was not empty. It was aware. The town of sand and echoes. After several days of walking, Mira came upon a town, a circle of low, sun-bleached homes clustered around a dry well. The people there were cautious. They moved slowly. They rarely spoke. She sat at the edge of the marketplace, quietly playing her wooden flute. The notes drifted between stalls and faded into the dunes. No one approached her, until an old man with eyes the color of cracked stone said softly, "You brought music." "Why?" She answered, "To hear what the desert remembers." He looked at her for a long while, then replied, "Then you should visit the Whispering Pit." The Whispering Pit, it lay beyond the town, a deep crater carved into the desert floor. Smooth walls, too round to be natural. At night, winds blew into it and never came out. The townsfolk believed it was cursed. But Mira climbed down into it just before sunrise, carrying nothing but a single seed and her breath. At the bottom, the air was still. There was no wind, no heat, only the softest echo, her own presence reflecting back at her like water. She placed her hands on the ground and whispered, "I'm listening." And the desert answered. The voice beneath sand, it wasn't a word. It wasn't a sound. It was a pull, like a thread tugging gently at her heart. Visions filled her mind. Dry rivers that once sang, people dancing under starlight, and a great storm that buried their names in silence. And one phrase, "We were not forgotten. We became part of the stillness." Mira knelt. She planted her seed in the very center of the pit. And as she rose, the sand shimmered. Just for a second. Then stillness returned. The boy with the wind in his hair. The next day, as Mira prepared to leave the town, a boy approached her. He couldn't have been more than 10. His hair was sun-bleached, his feet bare. He said only one thing, "I heard the pit sing." Mira smiled and handed him a seed. "Listen to it, then plant it where you think no one's listening." He nodded and ran off without another word. The world begins again as Mira walked on. The desert wind picked up behind her, and far below the sand, the seed stirred. Not to sprout yet, but to remember, because not all growth is green. Some begin in stone, some wait lifetimes beneath silence, and some are born the moment someone listens. Chapter: The shore of speaking waves. After weeks in the desert, Mira walked until sand gave way to stone, and stone softened into cool grass. The air changed, richer, heavier. And then she heard it, the ocean. It didn't whisper like the forests. It didn't hum like the bell. It didn't echo like the pit. The sea spoke, boldly, endlessly. Waves crashed against jagged cliffs and rolled over stones with the voice of old memory. Not hidden, but wide open, like a heart turned outward to the sky. Mira stood at the edge for a long time, watching, listening. Then she followed the wind down a winding path toward a small harbor town shaped like a crescent moon. The town that faced the sea, the harbor, was quiet, not because people were silent, but because the sea spoke over them. Fishermen mended nets without speaking. Children ran between boats with salt in their hair and laughter on their skin. But Mira noticed something strange. The sea birds didn't sing. They circled overhead, but never called. As if listening too, she asked an old sailor, "Why are the birds so quiet?" He replied, "They say the sea is telling a story too long to interrupt." That night, Mira couldn't sleep. She walked the beach barefoot beneath the stars. And that's when she heard it again. Not the crash of waves, but words carried between tide and wind. A voice, not hers. "We carry what the mountains bury. We sing what the wind forgets." The song in the bottle at dawn. Mira found a glass bottle caught between two rocks. Inside, a rolled piece of parchment, sealed with wax. She opened it gently. On the page were only 3 lines. "If you find this, you can hear. If you plan it, you believe. If you wait, we'll return." She turned the paper over. Taped to the back was a seed. It shimmered faintly with the light of dawn. Not the forest's green, not the desert's gold, but blue, like the deep places of the ocean. Planting in water, Mira returned to the dock and asked the oldest boatman to take her to the place of low islands. The name locals gave to a cluster of sandbars that appeared only at low tide. They set out at noon. By evening, they reached a flat, sun-warmed patch of sand surrounded by nothing but sea. Mira stepped off the boat with her seed. She dug a small hollow into the wet sand and placed it there, whispering, "You're not lost. You're listening." Then the tide returned, and the island vanished beneath the sea. The listening current as they rowed back, the boatman said nothing. But when they reached the harbor, he handed Mira a wooden coin carved with a wave symbol. "No one else hears what you do," he said, "but I think the sea remembers you." That night, Mira dreamed of an underwater forest, where kelp grew like cathedrals and whales sang to roots glowing blue. She woke with tears on her cheek. The map with no roads. Mira's journey continued, but now she carried more than seeds. She carried songs. Some were short, like rain tapping a rooftop. Some were long, like mountains turning to sand. Some weren't even sounds, just silences shaped like truths. And in every town, someone heard her before she spoke. Because by now, the world had begun to remember her kind, the listeners. Chapter: The Boy and the Breath of Dust. His name was Kien. He had lived all his life in the desert town of Etma, where the sun cracked the earth each morning and the nights sang with jackals and ghosts. No one had ever taught him to listen. Not really. But the day he met Mira, the woman who gave him a seed and walked into the dunes, something inside him changed. That night, he couldn't sleep. He held the seed in his hand. It was warm, not from the sun, but from presence, as though something inside it breathed very, very slowly. The next morning, he walked into the desert alone. The forgotten cistern. Kien remembered an old place beyond the western ridge, a crumbling well where elders used to gather, long abandoned after the water dried. No one went there anymore. The wind was too strong, the stories too thick. But he did. He reached it by dusk, a stone ring half buried in sand, with thorn bushes curled around its base like sleeping serpents. He stepped down into it carefully. The air was cooler here, still, and when he stood at the center, he felt it, a pulse beneath the earth. Just like Mira had said. He knelt, dug with his hands, planted the seed, then whispered, "I believe in you." What the wind brought, the wind picked up that night. But instead of sharp, it was round, gentle. It circled the boy as he lay curled in the cistern. He fell asleep with the stars above him, and dreamed for the first time in years. He dreamed of a tree that shimmered like heat waves. Its branches hummed with memory. And a voice, not Myra's, not his own, said, "One seed, one silence. One silence, one song." When he awoke, a small green shoot had broken through the dust beside him, and the air smelled faintly of water. The children who watched Kien didn't tell anyone, but the children noticed. He stopped running like before. He started sitting, listening. When other boys laughed or shouted, Kien only smiled. And sometimes, birds gathered on rooftops near him, though they never sang. One evening, a girl named Sana crept beside him and asked, "Are you waiting for something?" Kien looked toward the sky and replied, "No, I think it's waiting for me." The next morning, she brought him a smooth stone from the riverbed. "I think this listens too," she said. He nodded and placed it beside the seedling in the cistern. The first circle, by the time the shoot had grown into a tiny sapling, 5 other children had begun visiting it too. They didn't speak much. They just sat around it, sometimes with gifts, shells, feathers, a folded drawing, a cup of cooled tea. No adults joined, but the town grew softer. The market haggling became quieter. A fence long broken was fixed. A dusty bench was polished with sandcloth. No one claimed credit. No one needed to. The listening had begun. A letter from the wind one day, long after the sapling had become a tree as tall as the cistern wall, Kien found a piece of paper lodged between its branches. A message, written in careful handwriting he did not recognize, but felt familiar. "You're doing it. I can feel you from across the sea. Keep listening. Keep planting. I'll see you again." There was no name, but Kien knew. He held the note against his chest and whispered to the wind, "Thank you." Chapter: Reunion. Beneath the listening trees, the forest was ancient, tall and wise, full of stories whispered by leaves and shadows. Mira had returned after many years, following the trail of seeds and songs that had spread like quiet rivers through the world. Kien had traveled far too, carrying his desert tree in a pot, now sturdy and strong. They met on a narrow path where moss covered fallen logs, and the air was thick with the scent of earth and rain. Mira smiled softly when she saw Kien approaching, his face marked by sun and wind but calm as still water. He held out his tree. She touched the leaves gently and said, "You've done well." The new circle around them, children and grown listeners gathered, each holding small seedlings or stones, ready to plant or share a story. Mira spoke quietly. "The world is listening now, but listening is only the first step. We must learn to speak gently in return." Kien nodded. He looked at the forest, then at the sky, and said, "Then let us speak, with roots and wind, with seeds and silence together." A seed for tomorrow, they planted Kien's tree in the soft earth beside Myra's. The children dug with eager hands, careful and slow. When the last handful of soil covered the roots, a breeze swept through the forest. It carried a song, not loud but certain, a song of hope, patience, and the quiet power of listening. Chapter: The children of the Whispering Woods. Years passed, and the forest around Mira and Kien's planted trees grew thick and green. The trees seemed to breathe with the voices of those who listened, their leaves rustling softly as if sharing secrets. The children, once small and shy, now ran freely beneath the canopy, their laughter blending with the quiet symphony of the woods. Each child carried a seed or a small stone, a promise of something waiting to be heard. Among them was Lena, a curious girl with wide eyes and a heart full of questions. She often wandered farther than the others, listening to the subtle sounds of the forest, the flutter of wings, the crack of a twig, the distant hum of bees. One day, Lena found a small hollow at the base of an ancient oak. Inside lay a smooth, glowing stone, pulsing faintly with light. She picked it up gently. The forest around her grew still. And then the stone spoke, not in words but in feelings, warmth, patience, and an invitation. Lena smiled, knowing her journey was just beginning. Chapter: Lena and the heart of the forest. Lena held the glowing stone close as she walked deeper into the whispering woods. The pulse from the stone seemed to guide her steps, beating softly like a quiet drum inside her palm. As she moved between towering trees and tangled vines, the forest seemed to lean in, listening to her every breath. Suddenly, the path opened into a hidden glade. Light filtered through the leaves, painting the ground with patches of gold. In the center of the glade was a small pool of water, perfectly still and crystal clear. Lena knelt beside the pool and gently placed the glowing stone on the surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then ripples spread out like tiny waves, and the water shimmered with colors that shifted and danced, deep blues, soft greens, and bright silvers. Images appeared in the water, ancient trees growing tall, seeds sprouting in forgotten places, people gathering to listen and share stories. The stone's pulse grew stronger. Lena understood. The stone was not just a seed, but a keeper of memories. It held the heart of the forest, the stories of all who had listened before her. She smiled, feeling the weight and wonder of her new responsibility. Chapter: Lena's tale of listening, carrying the glowing stone gently in her hands. Lena returned to the circle of children and grown listeners who gathered beneath the great trees. She placed the stone at the center of their meeting place, a ring of smooth stones and soft moss, and spoke in a voice soft but steady. This stone holds the voices of the forest. It remembers the seeds planted long ago, the whispers of the wind, and the songs of those who listen. One by one, the children approached, placing their hands lightly on the stone. As they did, faint images and feelings flickered in the air, like shadows of stories waiting to be told. The elders smiled, watching as the new generation began to understand the quiet power of listening. That evening, Lena taught the children how to listen not just with their ears, but with their hearts. Listening is more than hearing. It is opening yourself to what the world wants to share. It is patience and kindness and hope. As night fell, the glowing stone pulsed softly, lighting the faces around it like a gentle fire. And the forest seemed to lean in closer, eager for the stories yet to come. Chapter: The story of the lost river. As the children sat quietly around the glowing stone, images began to shimmer in the air, soft, flowing shapes that grew clearer with every passing moment. Lena watched as the stone revealed a story long forgotten. There once was a great river, wide and deep, that flowed through the heart of the land. It sang a song that nourished the earth, gave life to forests, and carried the dreams of all who lived beside it. But one year, the river disappeared. The land grew dry. Trees withered. Animals left. People forgot the sound of water. The glowing stone pulsed gently, showing how the river had not vanished but had gone underground, hidden beneath layers of stone and silence. The story was a reminder. Sometimes life retreats, but it never truly leaves. It waits to be heard again, to return when the time is right. Lena turned to the children and said softly, "The river teaches us that even when things seem lost, they are still there, waiting for us to listen and bring them back." The children nodded, their eyes reflecting the shimmering light of the stone. And somewhere deep in the forest, a faint sound of flowing water began to stir. Chapter: Awakening the Lost River. The morning after the glowing stone revealed the story of the lost river, Lena awoke with a sense of purpose stronger than ever. The words she had spoken still echoed in her heart. Even when things seem lost, they are still there, waiting for us to listen and bring them back. She gathered the children of the forest circle beneath the tall oaks, their faces bright with curiosity and hope. "We must find the river," Lena said. "Not the river above the ground, but the one that sleeps beneath. We will listen for its heartbeat." The children nodded, each clutching a small token, stones, feathers, tiny seeds, gifts to offer the river. The journey to the hidden spring together, they followed the faintest hints of the river's song. A trickle in a dry creek bed, the damp scent of moss hidden among rocks, the softest whisper of water beneath a fallen log. Days turned into weeks as they walked through the forest, learning to move quietly, to watch carefully, and to listen deeply. Lena taught them to feel the earth beneath their feet, to sense the currents hidden in the soil. One afternoon, after a long day of searching, the group reached a quiet glen where the ground felt cool and moist despite the summer heat. At the center, hidden beneath a tangle of roots, they found a small spring, bubbling gently but covered with leaves and earth. The river was waking. The ceremony of water and song that evening, beneath a sky painted with stars, the children and elders gathered to celebrate. They formed a circle around the spring. Lena held the glowing stone above the water, and the pool reflected its blue light like a mirror. One by one, the children stepped forward, offering their tokens to the spring, dropping them gently into the clear water. As the offerings touched the surface, the water shimmered and glowed. Lena led them in a song, a melody soft and slow, inspired by the stories from the glowing stone and the river's hidden journey. The sound rose, wrapping around the forest, weaving through branches and leaves, carried on the wind. The river returns days passed, and the spring began to swell. Grass and flowers returned to the glen, brightening the earth like brushstrokes of green and gold. Animals cautiously came back, birds nesting in nearby trees, rabbits darting through the underbrush. And then one morning, a gentle flow of water burst forth from the spring, trickling down the rocks and into the dry creek bed. The lost river was returning. The children cheered quietly, understanding this was only the beginning. Lena smiled, knowing that by listening with their hearts, they had helped bring life back to the land. The promise of listening as the river grew, so did the forest's song. The glowing stone pulsed softly in Lena's hands, a reminder that every story, every seed, every act of listening mattered. The children promised to care for the river and the forest, to keep listening, and to share what they had learned with others. For they knew that the world's most powerful magic was not in grand gestures or loud words, but in the quiet, steady act of opening one's heart to listen and to heal. Chapter: Lena's journey beyond the forest with the glowing stone carefully wrapped and tucked into her satchel. Lena said goodbye to the forest and her friends. The trees whispered blessings in the breeze, and the river sang softly behind her, a constant companion. She traveled through villages and towns, places where the earth was cracked, and people's voices were loud but tired. Lena carried the story of the lost river and the song of listening like a quiet light, hoping it might find a home in these weary hearts. In a small village surrounded by dusty fields, she gathered children and elders in the town square. She placed the glowing stone in the center and began to tell them the story. The river's disappearance, its hidden life beneath the ground, and the power of listening to what the world quietly offers. The villagers listened, some skeptical at first, but as Lena spoke, they noticed a change. The wind seemed to soften. The sun felt gentler. And their hearts opened to the idea that maybe, just maybe, they could help the earth heal. The seed of change inspired by Lena, the villagers began to look more carefully at their land. They dug small holes to plant seeds, carried water to thirsty roots, and sat in silence, learning to listen to the whispers of wind and earth. Lena taught them songs, soft melodies that carried hope and patience. At night, under starlit skies, the villagers gathered around fires, sharing stories and dreams of a future where the land and people thrived together. The glowing stone pulsed quietly among them, a steady heartbeat reminding all that healing was possible through listening and care. The first green shoots months later, the dusty fields began to change. Tiny green shoots broke through the cracked earth, reaching toward the sky with fragile strength. The villagers smiled and cried, knowing these small signs were the beginning of something new and beautiful. Lena stayed with them for a time, helping nurture the growing life and teaching the children to become listeners like those in the forest. She knew the journey was far from over. The world was wide, and many places still needed to hear the song of the lost river. A message carried by the wind one morning, as Lena prepared to continue her travels, a soft breeze carried a message, an echo of the glowing stone's story. Wherever you go, you carry the river's song. Listen well, and the world will open. With a heart full of hope and courage, Lena stepped forward into the wide world, ready to plant seeds of listening and healing wherever the wind would take her. Chapter: Lena and the City of Forgotten Voices. After many days walking through rolling hills and quiet valleys, Lena arrived at a bustling city surrounded by high stone walls and narrow streets. The city was alive with noise, merchants shouting, carts rumbling, and crowds rushing past. But beneath the clamor, Lena sensed something missing, a silence where stories could grow. She found a small square where children played among cracked fountains and worn benches. Lena sat quietly with the glowing stone beside her, watching the city pulse with restless energy. A boy named Aaron, curious and thoughtful, approached her. "Why do you carry that stone?" he asked. Lena smiled softly. "It holds stories of rivers, trees, and people who have learned to listen." Aaron looked around, then whispered, "I think this city has forgotten how to listen." The gathering of voices that evening, Lena and Aaron gathered others who felt the same, those tired of the noise but unsure how to find calm. Together, they created a space in the heart of the city, a circle where everyone could come to speak softly, share stories, and listen deeply. Lena placed the glowing stone in the center. She taught them how to slow down their breaths, how to hear the quiet sounds beneath the chaos. Little by little, the city's restless energy softened. People started to notice the leaves on the trees, the birds' songs, the stories whispered in the wind. A garden of listening with the group's encouragement, the city's empty lots began to bloom. They planted gardens filled with herbs, flowers, and trees, places for quiet thought and gentle gathering. Aaron and Lena taught children to care for these gardens, sharing songs and stories from the glowing stone. The gardens became sanctuaries, pockets of peace where the city's heartbeat slowed and listening grew stronger. The night of stories, one cool evening, the circle gathered for a special night. Lanterns hung from tree branches, casting soft light on faces filled with wonder. Lena invited everyone to share a story, a memory, a dream, a hope. As each voice rose, the glowing stone pulsed in time, weaving their words into a tapestry of connection. The city, once full of forgotten voices, was learning to listen again. The promise of the journey Lena knew her journey was far from over. Beyond the city walls lay new places, deserts, mountains, rivers, each with their own stories waiting to be heard. But here, in the city of forgotten voices, a seed had been planted. And that was enough for now. She smiled, feeling the stone's steady pulse in her hand. "Listening is a journey," she whispered. "One we take together, step by step." Chapter: Lena's ascent to the mountain village. After leaving the bustling city behind, Lena traveled toward the towering mountains visible on the horizon, their peaks crowned with snow and mystery. The air grew cooler as she climbed higher, and the landscape shifted from rolling hills to rocky paths and ancient trees wrapped in mist. At the base of the tallest peak, she found a small village perched on a cliff edge. The villagers were strong and proud, shaped by the harshness of the mountain, but Lena noticed a quiet tension in their eyes, a story left unspoken. She was welcomed warmly, but sensed the villagers carried burdens heavier than their packs. The river that once nourished their fields had shrunk to a trickle, and the mountain winds whispered of change and loss. The silent mountain Lena spent days learning from the villagers, listening to their stories around the firelight. She heard of storms that shifted the earth, of seeds that would not grow, and of voices silenced by fear and tradition. The glowing stone in her satchel pulsed softly, reminding her of the power of listening, not just to words, but to silences, to the spaces between. One evening, an elder named Taro spoke quietly. "The mountain holds many voices, but sometimes it is the silence between them that speaks the loudest." Lena realized her work here would be different. It was not just about healing the land, but healing the unseen wounds between the people. The ceremony of shadows and light together with Taro and a group of villagers, Lena prepared a ceremony to honor what was lost and to open space for new voices to grow. They gathered at twilight on a rocky plateau overlooking the valley. Lanterns were lit and carried to the edge of the cliff, their flames flickering against the darkening sky. Each person shared a silent promise, a hope held in their heart, spoken not aloud but felt deeply. Lena placed the glowing stone at the center, its light pulsing steadily like a heartbeat. As shadows lengthened, a gentle breeze rose, carrying their silent wishes into the mountain air. New growth on old ground in the following weeks. Lena helped the villagers plant new gardens on terraces carved into the mountainside. She taught them to listen to the mountain's rhythms, when to plant, when to wait, when to trust the slow dance of growth. The villagers began to speak more freely, sharing stories long held inside, weaving new songs of community and care. And slowly, the river began to swell again, fed by unseen springs and the patience of the mountain earth. A mountain song one morning, as the sun rose over the peaks, Lena and Taro climbed to the highest point of the village. Together, they sang a quiet song, a melody born from silence and stories, from listening and healing. The wind carried their voices across the valley, a promise to the land and to each other. Lena smiled, feeling the glowing stone warm against her chest. The journey continued, through mountains, forests, cities, and deserts, with every step a chance to listen, to learn, and to heal. Chapter: Lena's journey to the desert of silent winds after leaving the mountain village. Lena traveled toward the vast desert, known as the Desert of Silent Winds. The sun blazed fiercely during the day, and the nights were cool and full of stars. The desert was a place where silence was both a challenge and a gift. As she crossed the rolling dunes, Lena noticed how the wind carried no song, only the soft shifting of sand. The people who lived on the desert's edge were few but resilient, shaped by the endless horizon and the quiet. She arrived at a small oasis village, where wells ran low, and the land thirsted for stories as much as for water. The desert's secret Lena sat with the village elders, listening to their tales of the desert's history. Stories of ancient rivers that once flowed freely, of seeds scattered by nomads, and of silence that had grown too heavy over the years. The glowing stone pulsed faintly, as if sensing the desert's deep longing. A young girl named Zara approached Lena shyly, carrying a handful of dried flowers. "I want to learn how to hear the desert's voice," she said softly. Lena smiled warmly. "The desert speaks in many ways, not always with sound. We must learn to listen with our whole selves." Learning the language of silence, Lena and Zara spent days wandering the dunes, learning to read the desert's subtle signs. The patterns in the sand, the flight of birds at dawn, the warmth of the sun on the skin. They practiced sitting in stillness, letting the silence become a canvas for thoughts and dreams. Lena taught Zara and the villagers to share stories around the fire, stories that honored the desert's quiet strength. A festival of shadows and light to celebrate the desert's resilience. Lena helped organize a festival beneath the stars. Lanterns made of paper and reeds floated on the oasis water, their reflections dancing like fireflies. Villagers shared poems and songs, their voices weaving with the soft desert breeze. The glowing stone rested at the festival's center, its light mingling with the flickering lanterns. In the silence between the sounds, Lena felt the desert breathing, alive, waiting, and ready to sing again. Seeds on the wind before Lena left the desert. Zara gave her a small pouch filled with desert seeds, a promise that the desert's story would continue to grow. Lena tucked the pouch into her satchel, feeling the weight of new beginnings. She looked out over the endless dunes, knowing her journey would take her next to distant shores, ancient forests, and places yet unknown. Chapter: Lena and the shores of whispering tides. After leaving the vast desert behind, Lena traveled toward the coast, where the land met the endless ocean. The air was salty and fresh, filled with the sounds of crashing waves and the cries of seabirds. The shores were wild and beautiful, but Lena sensed a restless sadness beneath the surface. She arrived at a small fishing village nestled between rocky cliffs and sandy beaches. The villagers were skilled in the ways of the sea, but many had lost touch with the old stories. the songs of tides, the whispers of the wind, and the mysteries carried by the waves. The Song of the Tides. Lena met an old fisherman named Kai, whose eyes reflected both the depth of the ocean and the weight of forgotten tales. Kai shared with Lena the village's struggle. The fish were fewer each year, the storms harsher, and the connection between the people and the sea had grown fragile. The glowing stone pulsed gently in Lena's hand, as if responding to the ocean's call. Together, they walked along the shore, listening to the rhythm of the tides, the shifting sands, and the distant roar of waves. Restoring the balance, Lena gathered the villagers for a meeting beneath the setting sun. She told them the story of the lost river, the mountain winds, and the silent desert, stories of listening, patience, and healing. She placed the glowing stone on a weathered driftwood altar and encouraged the villagers to share their memories of the sea and the land. Old songs were sung again, new stories were born, and the village began to heal. They planted coastal gardens with salt-tolerant plants, cleaned the beaches, and learned to honor the tides as more than just a source of food, but as a living story. The night of stars and waves. One night, as stars blanketed the sky, the villagers gathered on the beach for a ceremony of light and water. Lanterns floated on the waves, casting shimmering reflections like stars fallen to earth. Lena and Kai led a chant, a melody woven from the ocean's song and the glowing stone's heartbeat. The waves responded with a gentle roar, as if the sea itself was joining in the celebration. A new journey begins as dawn broke. Lena packed her satchel, the glowing stone still pulsing softly. Zara's desert seeds and the mountain village's promise were tucked inside, reminders of the journey so far. Kai handed Lena a carved piece of driftwood, a symbol of the sea's resilience and mystery. "The ocean has many stories," he said quietly. "And now so do you." With a heart full of gratitude and hope, Lena set her sights on the horizon, ready to continue her journey to places yet unknown. Chapter: Lena's voyage across the endless sea. With the carved driftwood from Kai tucked safely in her bag, alongside the glowing stone and seeds, Lena boarded a small fishing boat bound for distant islands across the vast ocean. The waves rocked gently beneath her, and the salty wind whispered promises of adventure. Days turned into nights as the stars became her compass, guiding her through the deep blue waters. The island of Echoing Hearts. One morning, the silhouette of an island appeared on the horizon, lush, green, and alive with song. Lena stepped onto soft sand and was greeted by islanders whose faces shone with curiosity and kindness. But soon she learned their smiles hid a quiet sorrow. The island's voices had grown faint, and the songs that once united the people were slipping away. The glowing stone pulsed warmly, as if urging Lena to help restore their lost harmony. The Festival of Voices. Lena gathered the islanders and shared the stories she carried, of rivers, mountains, deserts, and seas, and the power of listening. Together, they planned a festival to celebrate the island's voices, past, present, and future. For days, the islanders prepared songs, dances, and stories to share. When the festival began, the island was alive with sound. Drums echoed like thunder, voices rose like waves, and laughter sparkled like sunlight. The heart of the island at the festival's peak, Lena led a quiet moment, placing the glowing stone in the center of the circle. She invited everyone to close their eyes and listen, not just to the music, but to the silence between notes, the beating of their own hearts, and the shared breath of the island. When they opened their eyes, something had shifted. The island's song was whole again, woven from many voices, old and new. A new chapter. Lena knew her journey would continue beyond this island. For every place held stories needing to be heard and hearts ready to listen. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, Lena smiled with quiet joy. The glowing stone pulsed gently in her hand, a steady light on the path ahead. With the island's blessing and new songs in her heart, Lena set sail once more, ready for whatever stories awaited. Chapter: The Forgotten Valley. After leaving the island of Echoing Hearts behind, Lena set her course toward a distant land whispered about in sailor tales, the Forgotten Valley. Hidden between towering cliffs and dense fog, the valley was said to be a place where time slowed and old memories lingered like shadows. As Lena's boat slipped quietly into the valley's misty inlet, she felt a hush settle over everything, a silence so deep it almost sang. She stepped onto soft earth, greeted by a few villagers who seemed wary but hopeful. The valley was beautiful, yet tinged with sadness. Trees stood tall, but leaves whispered secrets of forgotten joys and lost connections. Whispers of the past. Lena spent days wandering the valley, listening to the stories held by its people. She learned that many had left long ago, seeking brighter futures elsewhere, leaving the valley quiet and empty. Those who remained often felt alone, caught between the past's weight and an uncertain future. The glowing stone seemed to hum softly, reminding Lena of the valley's hidden heart. Rekindling the flame one evening, Lena gathered the villagers around a fire in the valley's center. She shared stories from her travels, the river's return, the mountain's song, the desert's silence, and the island's voices. She invited everyone to share their memories and hopes, lighting lanterns as symbols of renewal. Slowly, laughter returned, mingling with the crackling fire and the soft glow of the stone. Together, they planted trees and flowers, creating spaces for new stories to grow. The valley awakens as days turned into weeks. The valley seemed to breathe anew. Birds returned, songs filled the air, and people began to reconnect, not only with each other, but with the land itself. The villagers found strength in remembering and hope in new beginnings. Lena smiled, knowing the valley's story was no longer forgotten, but woven into the greater tapestry of the world. A journey without end. With the valley's blessings, Lena prepared to continue her journey. She carried with her the stories of every place she had touched and the glowing stone pulsing softly like a heartbeat. The world was vast, full of voices waiting to be heard and hearts ready to listen. And so, with a spirit full of hope and a path unfolding before her, Lena stepped forward into the endless story. Chapter: The City of Glass. Leaving the Forgotten Valley behind, Lena traveled to a city unlike any she had seen before, the City of Glass. Towering buildings shimmered like crystals in the sunlight, and streets were paved with smooth, reflective stones. Everything gleamed, yet beneath the sparkling surface, Lena sensed a fragile quiet. The city was known for its beauty and innovation, but also for its isolation. People lived in their own reflections, often forgetting to truly see or hear each other. Breaking the silence, Lena walked through the gleaming streets, the glowing stone warm in her hand. She noticed how few people spoke to one another. Their faces were often turned toward screens or mirrors. She found a small park where a few children played quietly. Approaching them, Lena shared stories of the forest, mountains, deserts, and seas, stories about listening and connection. At first, the children were shy, but soon their eyes brightened with curiosity. A mirror of stories, Lena invited the children and nearby adults to join a circle in the park. She placed the glowing stone on a smooth glass pedestal, where it shimmered and reflected light. Each person was encouraged to share a story or a feeling, and to listen without judgment. Slowly, voices rose and mingled, creating a warm chorus that filled the city's quiet spaces. Glass gardens inspired, the city began to create glass gardens, places where nature and stories could grow together amid the sparkling walls. Plants thrived in delicate glass planters, and people gathered to share songs, poems, and dreams. The glowing stone found a new home in the city's heart, pulsing softly as a beacon of connection. Reflections and new beginnings. Lena watched as the City of Glass began to open its heart. Reflections became mirrors of understanding rather than walls of isolation. She felt the glowing stone's steady pulse, reminding her that every place, no matter how different, could learn to listen and heal. With a gentle smile, Lena prepared to continue her journey, knowing the next chapter awaited beyond the horizon. Chapter: The Whispering Forest. Leaving behind the shimmering City of Glass, Lena ventured toward a dense forest known to locals as the Whispering Forest. Legends spoke of ancient trees that held the wisdom of centuries, their leaves murmuring secrets to those willing to listen. As Lena stepped beneath the towering canopy, she was enveloped in a cool, green shade. The air was thick with the scent of moss and earth, and a soft, almost musical whisper seemed to drift through the branches. Voices in the leaves in a small clearing. Lena met an old woman named Mira, the forest's guardian. Mira explained that the forest was alive with stories, voices of animals, plants, and people who had walked there long ago. But recently, the forest had grown quiet. Visitors no longer paused to listen, and the ancient wisdom was fading. Lena felt the glowing stone pulse warmly in response. Learning to listen deeply together, Lena and Mira led groups through the forest, teaching them to listen not just with ears but with their hearts. They learned to hear the subtle sounds, the rustle of leaves, the drip of water, the distant call of a bird. The forest stories unfolded slowly, like petals opening in the morning light. The gathering of the forest one evening, the villagers and travelers gathered around a bonfire beneath the ancient trees. Each person shared a story inspired by the forest, their dreams, fears, hopes, and memories. The glowing stone rested near the fire, its light mingling with the flickering flames. In the warmth of shared stories, the forest seemed to awaken, its whispers growing stronger. A promise to return as dawn painted the sky with soft colors, Lena promised to carry the forest's stories forward. Mira handed her a small pouch of seeds from the oldest tree, a symbol of growth, memory, and renewal. With the glowing stone in her hand and new stories in her heart, Lena continued on her journey, knowing that listening could heal even the deepest silences. Chapter: The heart of the Whispering Forest. The morning light filtered gently through the dense canopy as Lena prepared for another day in the Whispering Forest. The small pouch of ancient seeds given by Mira felt heavy with meaning in her satchel, a promise of growth and renewal. Lena knew the forest's story was layered, woven through countless lifetimes, and to truly understand, she would need to listen more deeply than ever before. The forest's hidden paths. Mira led Lena to a narrow trail winding through towering trees whose trunks were thick with moss and thyme. The path was barely visible, covered in fallen leaves and soft earth. "Few find this trail," Mira whispered, "for it is where the oldest stories live, guarded by the trees themselves." As they walked, Lena noticed how the forest seemed to breathe, each step releasing the scent of pine and earth, each breath carrying whispers like secrets shared just for her. Suddenly, a gentle rustling drew her attention. A small fox emerged from the underbrush, its eyes bright and curious. It lingered a moment before darting deeper into the forest. Mira smiled. The forest watches, and it welcomes those who come with respect. The circle of stones deep within the forest, they arrived at a clearing surrounded by ancient stones, worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. This was the Circle of Stones, a sacred place where villagers once gathered to share stories, celebrate the seasons, and honor the forest's spirit. Lena sat quietly among the stones, placing the glowing stone in the center. Its soft light illuminated the mossy ground, casting gentle shadows on the towering trees. Here, she began to speak softly, sharing stories of her journey, from the mountain village, across the desert, to the ocean shores and the city of glass. One by one, others joined, drawn by the light and the quiet power of shared stories. They spoke of joys and sorrows, of hopes and fears, and the deep connection between people and the natural world. The night of whispered dreams. As night fell, the forest came alive with sounds, crickets chirping, leaves rustling, an owl's distant call. Lena lay back on a bed of soft moss, the glowing stone resting beside her. She closed her eyes and let the forest's whispers fill her mind, feeling the pulse of life beneath the surface. In her dreams, the trees spoke, ancient voices telling tales of growth, loss, and endless cycles of renewal. She saw visions of seeds falling into fertile soil, roots weaving through the earth, and new life bursting forth in vibrant colors. Morning light and new beginnings at dawn, Lena awoke refreshed, the forest greeting her with soft golden light. She gathered the seeds Mira had given her and began planting them in the clearing, each one a symbol of the stories she hoped to carry forward. Mira joined her, smiling with quiet pride. "The forest will remember," she said, "and so will we." Leaving with a full heart before leaving the whispering forest, Lena met with the villagers and travelers who had come to listen and share. Together, they made a promise to carry the forest's stories into the world, to protect its quiet magic, and to keep listening even when silence grows heavy. With the glowing stone pulsing warmly in her hand and the ancient seeds safely stored, Lena set out once more. Her journey was far from over, but the forest had taught her something precious: that every voice matters, every silence holds meaning, and that healing begins when we truly listen. Chapter: The Floating City. After leaving the whispering forest, Lena followed the river that flowed out toward a mysterious place known as the Floating City. Unlike any city she had seen before, it was built upon large platforms that drifted gently on the water's surface, connected by swinging bridges and winding wooden walkways. The city shimmered under the sun, reflecting the sky and water so perfectly that it seemed almost unreal, a place caught between dream and reality. The weight of water. Lena quickly learned that life in the floating city was both beautiful and fragile. The people lived in harmony with the tides, fishing and trading by boat, but they also carried a heavy burden. The water that sustained them was slowly rising, threatening to flood their homes and wash away their history. The glowing stone pulsed softly in Lena's hand, as if urging her to help. Stories on the water. Lena gathered the city's elders and storytellers, inviting them to share memories of the city's past. The floods it had survived, the festivals held on the water, and the songs sung beneath the stars. She told stories from her travels, of mountains, deserts, forests, and glass cities, and the importance of listening and holding on to shared memories. Inspired, the community decided to hold a festival of lights and stories on the water, a way to honor their past and strengthen their bonds for the uncertain future. The Festival of Floating Lights. As night fell, lanterns floated across the water like gentle stars. People shared songs, poems, and tales that echoed softly over the waves. The glowing stone was placed at the center of a floating platform, its light mingling with the lantern's glow. Lena led a quiet moment of reflection, encouraging everyone to listen to the water's song, to each other, and to the hopes they carried within. A future on the horizon. The festival rekindled a sense of hope and community. Though the water rose, the people of the floating city found strength in their stories and each other. Before leaving, Lena was gifted a small carved boat, a symbol of resilience and journey. With the glowing stone and new stories close to her heart, Lena set sail once again, ready for the next chapter of her adventure. Chapter: The Journey's End and a New Beginning. After many seasons of travel, through mountains, deserts, forests, islands, cities, and rivers, Lena finally found herself standing on a quiet hill overlooking a vast landscape bathed in the golden light of sunset. The glowing stone pulsed gently in her hand, a familiar and comforting rhythm. Her journey had been long, filled with stories of sorrow and joy, silence and song, loss and renewal. Along the way, she had gathered not only stories but friendships, wisdom, and a deep understanding of the world's delicate balance. The circle of stories. Lena called together those she had met: villagers, city dwellers, islanders, fishermen, guardians, and travelers. From every corner of her journey, they came, carrying the stories and lessons they had shared with her. In the fading light, they formed a great circle beneath ancient trees, their voices weaving together in a tapestry of stories, memories, and dreams. The glowing stone rested in the center, shining softly as a beacon of connection. A gift to the world. Lena spoke, her voice steady and warm. Every story, every voice, is a thread in the fabric of our world. When we listen, truly listen, we heal, not only others, but ourselves. She offered the glowing stone to the circle, a symbol of shared understanding and hope. Together, they placed it upon the earth, where it radiated a soft light, promising that the stories would continue, carried by every heart willing to hear. Continuing the journey, though this chapter was ending, Lena knew that the journey itself was never truly over. Every place held stories waiting to be told. Every silence held a whisper to be heard. With a smile, Lena looked toward the horizon, where new adventures awaited. And as the stars began to twinkle above, she stepped forward, ready to listen, to share, and to journey on.